Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Steve Knopper, author of MJ, the Genius of Michael Jackson. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You ready to get started?
I am, yeah.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I would say finish the book. You have to kind of get out of the way of procrastination and distractions and just kind of slog through it. Even if you think that the draft that you're working on is terrible, which I think most authors do early in the process, you just have to power through it. Just plow through that thing, get to the end, get the words on the page, lots and lots and lots of words. However, whatever system works for you, whether you write every day or, whatever it is, there's lots of advice out there. But once you're done, that's when you go back in and you go through it with a scalpel and edit everything and make the hard choices and cut all the words and all that stuff. But that first kind of plowing through it, that is the crucial thing to finish a book.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it done and then clean it up from there. Have your editor help you and just sort out what you need to at that point.
Yeah, exactly. The first draft is the hardest for me always. I write nonfiction, and so there's always a pitch process with me. So it's not like I just write on my own and finish the whole book and then sort of say, here, editor, would you like this? With me, it's I come up with the idea and I pitch it. And in some cases with a book, it's like a huge proposal. So there's a lot of research and stuff involved. And then it becomes the actual writing of the book once I have a deal. So for me, it's sort of like work that I get paid to do, the process that I just described, plowing through it. But it's hard even under that circumstance. It's hard either way.
Well, I remember you mentioned prior to the show that you go through traditional publishers. So what you're doing is you're doing the pitch and the proposal, and then should it get approved, then you're doing the book on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I've written 2 books that are sort of narrative books, and then I've written a bunch of other books that are like a moon travel guide to Colorado, and I co-wrote The Complete Idiot's Guide to Starting a Band many years ago. So those were more sort of formatted books. But even in those cases, in all the cases, it was always sort of, I have an agent. The agent likes one of my ideas. He wants me to write on spec an elaborate proposal, including a sample chapter. And then he's going to shop it around to editors and publishers. And that's happened every time pretty much.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to ask, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
The hardest part for me is the idea, and I'm going through that now. There are people, I think, there are other writers I know who have ideas in their heads that are like popcorn popping. They're constantly coming up with ideas, and so many ideas, good ones, bad ones, many good ones, and they're all pitchable. I have friends who are really, really good at the ideas. With me, it's a little bit more of a try to come up with a few A-plus ideas a year. They tend to come to me less frequently. I'm a full-time freelance writer. I make my living at this, so I get by with, ideas off of my beat, which is the music business, so news. But the amazing kind of ideas in the clouds that lead to book deals, those are rarer for me. And so I struggle with that. Emotionally sometimes, psychologically, in addition to just the logistics of how do you come up with an idea. And so that's definitely the hardest part is hey, I've just written this amazing book. What are you going to do for the next one? I don't know. So that's something that's always challenging for me.
Well, to take it to the next level, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches that has worked well.
Sure. That's a tough question for me because I have never self-published. So it's usually not a case of me coming up with my own marketing strategy. But I will give you an example for a marketing strategy that kind of happened to me. So I'm not sure how instructive that is to your listeners, but after my previous book, Appetite for Self-Destruction, came out, it came out in 2009, which was a time when people were kind of worried about the economy, as you recall, and also the music business was in flux. They were just, the record labels were just giving up on CDs or just starting to kind of phase out CDs and starting to go in the direction of iTunes downloads and eventually streaming. So people were thinking about that. People were thinking about sort of, what am I going to do with all these CDs, and how, should I just buy all these 99-cent downloads? How should I change my music collection? So it's kind of an interesting, good time to come out with a book like that, and it got a lot of interest. I wound up, through the publicist at the publisher, I wound up getting on a bunch of prominent radio and TV broadcasts. I was on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, which was very exciting. And then talking about marketing, because of this kind of high profile at the time, all of a sudden these different music business conferences all around the world started to inquire. And so it turned, I didn't even know of the existence of a lot of these conferences, but there was Belarm in the Netherlands, and there was The Great Escape in the UK. And they all said, hey, we need a keynote speaker who has a new book out. And they would invite me to these conferences. And, I would do these speaking gigs. It turns out that a lot of different industries outside the music business were interested in sort of, what if technology wrecks my business model? What can I learn from the record business's mistakes? So I wound up doing kind of paid speaking gigs to, various companies, academic publishers and cable television companies and so forth. And so I wouldn't call that sort of a marketing strategy that I had in mind. I was lucky enough that all kind of fell in my lap, but it became something for 3 or 4 years there that I did to just keep promoting the book. And what I had to work on was sort of, what am I going to say in these speeches? How can I connect what I wrote about in the book, which was how the record industry made mistakes with the internet, to how can you, as an academic publisher, for example, not make a mistake when you're looking at the same kind of technology disruption that the music business already went through. So those 3 or 4 years were really kind of an interesting time. The challenge for me was just sort of being open to things that came my way and figuring out how to say, create speeches and create my own content that fit what all these kind of seemingly unrelated entities were looking for.
Well, and you bring up a great point, because you wrote the book and then you were able to completely leverage that as the authority with, hey, if your business does change, then, have me come talk about it, because this is what happened in the music industry and this could happen to you. So it's a great point that you make with that. And you had those speaking gigs for years. Now, were you also selling your book at these events, or were you giving it away as part of the package? How did that go?
Sometimes yes and sometimes no. There were places, certain festivals, and I spoke to a couple of book festivals and stuff like that, where they said, hey, have your publisher send us a stack of books and we'll sell them for you. And when somebody, like, for example, South by Southwest, the big music conference in Austin, did that. And that worked out really well because they have already a mechanism in place to sell books. But then there were others sort of, you're speaking at a ballroom in a hotel for a bunch of cable executives, and so I'd call my publisher and say, can you send some books? And then, this was before Apple Pay. So, nobody had any way to sort of accept credit cards, or, I didn't bring any change with me, or, so there were awkward logistical details that I struggled with, for sure, because I'm much stronger on the content side and not as strong on the kind of nuts and bolts business side. But I guess, as you point out, for me, and again, I can't say this was like a genius thing that I did. It just kind of came to me. It fell in my lap because others kind of created it. But recognizing that there were lessons in my book that, even though it was very specifically about the music business, but those lessons could be applied to broader companies outside the music business, was a revelation that came to me kind of midway through this whole process that I couldn't ignore, and turned out to be very lucrative. So it was great for a while. And then when it all went away, eventually, I was hoping to do this for a long, long time, but as the lifespan of a book doesn't last forever. And so at a certain point, I was kind of like, hey, where'd everybody go?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that too about technology. I mean, it's so crazy now because you have Apple Pay, you have Square, you have Venmo, and all these things where it's like, wow, why didn't they have this a few years ago and I'm doing this book signing? Because instead of just doing
Right.
cash or check, you've got so many different ways. And that kind of relates into what you were talking about with, hey, what happens when technology changes? So that's cool. Yeah, South by Southwest. I'm actually based in Arlington. It's right between Dallas and Fort Worth. So that's always a big deal here in Texas. Austin's about 200 miles south for us. So that's a huge event to be at.
Yeah, it was great. I'd been going there not for book purposes for many, many years. So I love it there. I mean, I just love seeing bands. I have friends who are there. I've been a music journalist since the early 90s. So that's definitely a place that I was kind of gunning for book promotion. So it was a great thing when it happened.
Well, and would you tell our listeners which magazine you're the contributing editor for?
Of course, I've been a contributing editor at Rolling Stone magazine since roughly 2002, and my area tends to be the music business. So I write a lot about, like I say in that book, I write a lot about concert tickets and scalping and Spotify and streaming. And early on, I wrote about how the record labels were suing their customers over internet piracy. I don't write about that stuff so much anymore. Now I write about sort of, Spotify went public and the record labels are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and will they share it with artists? And in addition to Rolling Stone, I write for a lot of other publications as well. So I've been trying to keep this one person company going for many, many years, and I'll keep doing it as long as I can.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Man, that as you probably know from all the people you interview, that's the hardest question. But I'm going to say, it changes every day. I'm going to say In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. Does that one come up? Have you heard that one? Have other people mentioned that one?
You were the first one, but I am very familiar with that book.
All right. Yes. I mean, there's these memes that go around on social media, on Twitter, and people say, what's the most scary book you've ever read? In Cold Blood is by far the scariest book I've ever read. I mean, it's a new journalism classic. I would go as far to say it's the best. I mean, David Halberstam and Gay Talese and all those other people notwithstanding, Joan Didion, I would go so far as to say In Cold Blood is the best new journalism book from that era. It takes this multiple homicide at a family home in rural Kansas and just goes through it and tells the story of what happened. The murderer walks down the road, he walks down the driveway, he picks up his shotgun, he walks into the girl's room, and it's just literally blow by blow, and it's just the meticulous detail that Mr. Capote was able to get through his reporting. It just adds up to this story that's unparalleled. And so what I learned I read that book, I think, I want to say high school, possibly college. And the thing I learned from it was just sort of inspiration for being a journalist. People think of journalists as people who write sort of in the inverted pyramid, who, what, when, why, where, why, and how at the beginning of the story, and then a kicker quote at the end. There's a routine to it, and you go to cover the city council meeting and all this stuff. But new journalism showed generations of great writers that you could tell a literary story, and that was the thing that I learned. And I've tried to do that in my two narrative books. I'm not sure I certainly didn't live up to Truman Capote, but I certainly tried to kind of write them both in that style. And I hope to write more that way eventually when I get a good idea.
Excellent. And for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
So this was the question I prepared the least for, I'm afraid, but I'm going to, can it be a quote from a song? I hope it can, because that's the one that I've prepared for.
It can be a quote from whatever you want.
Okay, so the quote that I've been thinking about a lot lately is from Kanye West in a song by his friend Kid Cudi called Make Her Say. And Kanye says at one point, "And that's my commandment, you ain't got to ask Moses." And even though, I mean, certainly it's not give me liberty or give me death, but I just love the idea of taking that line and ending everything I ever write with that. Like I write a story about the music business and then I say, and that's my commandment, you ain't got to ask Moses. So that's the one that comes to mind.
Nice. Yeah, I always love it when people share music quotes. I always have a lot of fun with that. So one of my favorite ones was, if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah, music quotes is a little bit of a rabbit hole. Yeah, I love lyrics. I'm a lyrics guy for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Steve, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Yeah, let's see. My website is knops.com. That's my childhood nickname. K-N-O-P as in Paul, P as in Paul, S as in Sam. Of my work and places to buy my book and all that stuff. But I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm pretty easy to reach. You can email me. It's pretty once you go to those places, it's pretty easy to find a way to email me.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you once again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.